Welcome back to Mosaics. I'm Holly Beach, your host with the Idaho Office for Refugees. Today we're talking with local tap dance artist Andrew Nemr. He is a first-generation American. His parents came from Lebanon, and he has some really exciting projects in the works that I'm really excited to share with you. So, Andrew, welcome to Mosaics.
Thanks for having me, Holly.
Thanks for being here. How many years have you been tap dancing?
Oh, 42. I started when I was 3.5 years old.
3.5 years old. That's incredible. Was that something you said as a little kid that you wanted to do, or was it kind of something that your family introduced you to?
Yeah, so I'm an only child, and my mom had taught kindergarten back in Lebanon, and so when I was born, she was teaching me numbers and alphabets and kind of all that stuff at home. And around the time I was 3.5, my folks said, "We think you should do something with other kids." And I was like, "All right, that sounds like a good idea." And there's a dance school by the house. And so we went, and I watched one class, and Mr. Chris Collins' dance studio, it was his place. He was teaching, and then after the class, I think the story goes that he came up and asked me, he was like, "Would you like to sign up?" I was like, "Yeah,
Oh, cool.
sounds good."
I love that he came over to you as a little 3-year-old and gave you that specific individual attention.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I've been really blessed with adults that have treated me like an adult from a very young age.
Yeah, so you got into it, and was it something that just stuck with you? You knew you wanted to keep doing it? Because we all have those stories from our childhood of, I took piano lessons for 2 years and then got distracted and started playing volleyball and then got distracted and started doing this. So you stuck with it.
Yeah, I think for me, the first thing was it was something that I could be good at. And it was the first thing that I got into where the vision of what was good was evident. I had a teacher, he was better than I was. There were older students in the performing group, quote unquote, in the dance studio. They were better than I was. And so there was this really quick achievement orientation that happened. And I bit on that.
Yeah.
That was a big deal for me. I started competing dance competitions when I was 6 and very quickly wanted to be around the best teachers in the dance studio, and that meant being part of the performing group, which meant more hours in the dance studio. And my folks were supportive. They were like, if he wants it, and most of the initiation was coming from me, so if he wants it, then we'll support him and we'll see where it goes. My dad was an artist at heart.
Yeah.
And so I think he was very open to seeing what would happen with the choices that I made, and trusting the choices that I was making, which is, the more I think about it, the more I think that was a gift.
Yeah. And your parents had to make some pretty big choices in their young adulthood. Before you were born, they left Lebanon. Can you explain the circumstances around that?
Sure. So somewhere between 73, 74, 75, civil war erupts in Lebanon. My parents were 21, 22, 23 when that was happening. They basically make the choice to leave, to say, if we want to have a family, it's not going to happen here in these circumstances, so let's figure out how to get out. And it's really their story to tell, but the highlight is they take a bus from Beirut to Paris. They have a couple $100 in their pocket, if that, and land eventually in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And that's where I was born.
And that's where you spent your early childhood, and then
A couple years. Moving around.
Yeah.
And then eventually make it to the States. I'm raised in Alexandria, Virginia.
Okay.
Start dancing there. See the movie Tap at Union Station in Washington, D.C., and that's where 6 years of dance school turns into the first time I see improvisational tap dancing, kind of the dancers from the generation that would have been active in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I see a craft that's expressive of the personalities of the people. And I'd never seen that before. I'd seen, you know, theatrical tap dancing. You're in a line, you're doing kicks, like everybody looks the same. You might have a solo, but the solo even has like a character that's not really you. And so this movie opens my eyes to an entirely new world, and that's when I flipped. And I leave the movie theater saying, you know, I think I want to become a tap dancer. And my folks look at me and they say, okay. And I think they look at each other and they say, well, we don't really know what that means, but let's see what happens.
So how did it play out for you from there to become that being your profession?
Within a year, I meet Gregory Hines and Savion Glover. We had looked in the newspaper for anything that had to do with rhythm tap. And back in the early 90s, late 80s, that was the terminology that kind of divided the tap dance world. You had theatrical tap dancing on one side, and then you had rhythm tap on the other. So the improvisational stuff, the stuff that was linked more to an individual persona, lived in the rhythm tap world. And I was on, you know, kind of this journey to just meet Gregory Hines. That's all I wanted to do. And so we're looking through the newspaper. We find an audition for a youth tap ensemble. We go, I try out. The company director says to me, your feet are good, but your ears need work. Like you don't know how to listen yet.
For that rhythm.
For the rhythm, for tone, for all the things that would be important for him, but not necessarily in where I'd come from. And he says, if you promise to learn how to listen, I'll take you. I said, I'm in.
Yeah,
Like,
I'll learn.
just let me in. Whatever it takes, just let me in. And so that was the start. Within a couple months, he shares with me a flyer of workshops that Gregory and Savion are teaching in New York City. And I grab the flyer, I run to my parents, I show them, and I say, can we? And they do one of those silent parent conversations where they say, like they're trying to make the choice with me present.
Yeah.
And they look at me and say, yeah, I think we can.
Wow.
And so, yeah, the dream of meeting Gregory Hines, I thought would take, you know, my entire life effectively.
So he must be a really famous person in the tap dance world.
Gregory Hines at the time was probably the most famous tap dancer. So he was the star of the movie Tap. He had starred in a film with Billy Crystal, a film with Mikhail Baryshnikov, Running Scared, White Nights, respectively. He'd been on Broadway, numerous shows at that point. He had been a child star, so before I was even born, he was on TV, like Ed Sullivan, The Tonight Show, with his brother and his dad in an act. Hines, and Dad. You know.
Sounds like a good TikTok channel for today.
Oh, gosh.
I can see that doing very well.
Oh, man, I can only imagine. Wow. Yeah, probably. But but Greg was the guy.
Wow. So you got to do that and you were just still a kid and your
I was
dreams coming
10.
true. Wow.
Yeah.
I love your parents, like just how supportive they are and going with it and letting you drive the ship, but really being that supporting presence for
my
you.
parents were ridiculous. Like, because eventually it's like, I ended up thinking that they just kind of said yes, right? And weren't thinking as much as I thought they should have, like weren't giving as much resistance
Really?
to this young kid who was like, let's go to New York and let's have this work, like, let's get to this workshop and meet these people. I'm like, did you ever think of like saying no? Did that ever cross your mind?
Have you asked them about it?
Yeah, and they said yes. Like, you know, we weighed out what we thought was good and what was happening and what we thought would be good for you, and it seemed like yes was the right answer. And I find that to be phenomenal, especially as an adult now looking back. Like, goodness gracious. Yeah, because there could have been so many other ways they could have gone. My folks could have said no. My folks could have said, "Well, you got to figure it out," especially as a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
um, or when I wanted to start my own dance company. They were like, "Yeah, okay, that's a great idea. Go figure it out," and they did not do that. They were like, "That sounds like a great idea. We'll support you.
Wow.
We'll give you the first seed round, effectively."
Yeah. And it's a lot of parents, I feel like, have this practical pressure on a kid. Like, how are you practically going to make money? And you don't hear a lot
Yeah.
about, tap dancers or if that's, as a
Oh,
career.
goodness, no.
I mean, maybe you do. I guess not in my
No.
circles.
I mean, even in New York, when I was coming up as a dancer, so I'm now a dancer with other dancers across the generations. I'm 10, 11, 12, 13. I've met Gregory. I've met Savion. Savion was like the de facto heir to Gregory Hines' position. So I'm in the mix of all the people. Gregory and Savion have introduced me to their mentors. So I've met the guys in the movie Tap that I saw and was like, this is amazing. And they're all telling me, well, hey, if you want to really, really do this, you're going to have to make your own work. There is no path laid before you. There's no, you go to college, you get a degree, you get a job in the field that you got the degree in. Like, that doesn't exist for a tap dancer.
Mm.
So you're going to have to figure out what you want to say, where you're going to say it, who you want to say it to, try to get them to where you want to say the thing,
Yeah.
and effectively build kind of a portfolio of things that will give you the resources to live. Henry Latang, Gregory's teacher, used to say, we do it because we love it. Because there's no real other reason to do it. It's like, you're not going to get rich and famous being a tap dancer, so you have to love the thing, or at least enjoy it, to put in the effort to do it for as long as it's going to take to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been the journey.
I think something we talked before this and something that stood out to me. So you moved to Boise right as the pandemic was starting.
Yeah,
And
day
I
one
said,
almost.
yeah. I said, man, what a time to move to a new place. And you didn't know any, you had friends, right? But,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
still, what a time. And you said, yeah, instability is just something that's kind of always been a part of my life.
Yeah.
And so I thought, wow, what an incredible way of looking at the world of like, instability can be really unsettling. And,
Yeah.
and the way you took that in stride, I thought, can you tell me more about that time of your life?
Sure. So now we're talking like 2019, 2020.
I skipped ahead a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Totally fine. I'm now a fully formed tap dancer. I've had a long career, 10 years, tap dance company, been running a not-for-profit for a while that's geared in like oral traditions and tap dance history. And I land a full-time gig in Vancouver, British Columbia. And it is the quintessential gig for a tap dancer who has any organizational skills or aspirations. So I'm now running a tap dance organization in Vancouver. It's phenomenal, but I'm pulling 70-hour weeks. Like, it's intense. Mm-hmm. And I burn out. And it's kind of a spectacular burnout. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to piece the things back together. This is like fall of 2019. And I say, well, it seems like I need to have a vacation. Like, I need to start building in some regular rhythm of get away from this rhythm, like literally leave that geography, rest, and then I can come back. And we can pull 70-hour weeks for a time, but I need to unplug. Mm. And I started looking around for where I could do that. And I'd come to Boise almost every year since 2014.
Okay.
And so I had a group of friends here. I knew about the river. I knew about the pace of life. And I was like, that would be a really good place to just rest. Mm. And so I bought a ticket for my first available day off, which would have been March of 2020. And so January of 2020 comes, February of 2020 comes, March of 2020 comes, and then all the stuff with COVID and the pandemic starts to be very real. And I'm sitting there with this plane flight. And then the announcement that they're going to shut down the border between Canada and the US. And my parents are still in New Jersey at the time, and I'm the only child. I say, all right, well, I think whatever happens, I need to be on the other side of the border. And so I make some calls, make sure everybody knows my personal situation, and everybody agrees, yeah, you need to be on the other side of the border. So I actually changed the date of my ticket to make sure it's ahead of the border closure, and I take the flight, and I fly to Boise. I called my friend ahead of time because they were going to host me for a week for spring break. And I said, listen, this is going to take a little longer than a week. Is that okay with you? And they talked it out with their family, and they said, yeah, come.
Wow.
So that was that. I think, so I'm an improvisationalist. Like the kind of tap dancing that I do is making up choices on the fly in a particular context. And that's been my training since I was 10 years old. So more than 30 years at this point. And I think there's often a lot of confusion around how improvisers make their choices. Most often it's described as, well, you just make a choice on the fly. And that's what you got, right? And so it's described kind of like magic. And it's more like, at least in my experience, being so formed in the things that you know and believe in and trust that the choices that you make that you would want to make in particular situations just come out of you. And so the instability of a scenario is not that big of a deal because I'm not relying on the scenario to be stable for me to feel like I can make good choices.
Yeah, because you're already so in tune with that inner truth that you live by.
Right? As a tap dancer, you never know what stage you're going to be dancing on, like the actual material of it, which can change what you can do and what you can't do. You often don't know the musicians that you're going to be playing with, which can change, your interaction with music, and you're the front person, like you're the person who's quote unquote really performing. So if you don't know the band behind you, how can you feel confident performing for the audience in front of you? And so all those kind of like unknowns become things that you learn how to work through for the sake of the end result. And the end result is just a good show.
Yeah.
Right? But improvising is just choice making. So for me, kind of my journey, especially post burnout, was an exploration of, well, we all make choices. And is there a way for me to make sure, quote unquote, in some way, that the choices that I make are actually good choices? Because I don't want to look back and say, oh, no, that was like fundamentally wrong in some way. And hindsight is 20/20, but you hear people's stories or you see people's lives, and there's sometimes like this fork in the road where, oh man, if they had made the other choice or one of the 10 other choices, their life could have been completely different.
Yeah.
And I felt like my burnout was almost like a gift to say, yeah, the way that you're running is not going to be the way that you can run. Like you're going to hit this kind of wall every time if you keep doing things the same way. And thankfully, I found a good counselor. I found some listening groups where people just gather and kind of listen for one another. I found Boise, which is like lots of space, very slow pace of life. And I would do things like I would go down to the river and I would try and walk on the river rocks. And if you've ever tried to walk on river rocks, you know that they're covered in moss and they're super slippery,
Very slimy.
right? And so this is like high risk, high risk activity, especially for a tap
You
dancer. 'Cause
need your
this is like-
toes to be very healthy.
Like, I do not want to be falling in the water on a rock. That
Yeah.
would not be good.
Yeah.
And stuff like that would slow me down. It's like, you have to take your time. And the water's cold. So now you have to bear cold water and take your time. It's like, okay, I think I'm learning a little bit of what the context of life actually feels like, rather than speeding through it, seeing how quickly you can make the choices, and then looking back and seeing if they were right or wrong,
Yeah.
which is effectively what happens in a tap dance performance. You just, time is going, you have 3 to 5 minutes, you make all the choices, and then you watch the videotape later. Right? Your first feedback would be the audience. Did they clap? Did they not?
Are they still sitting there?
Are
yes,
they still there?
that's good.
Right? No tomatoes. No fruit has been thrown. And but I was in that mode for a very long time. And that was so ingrained in me that in other places, that's just the mode that I would be in. And so the slowness of observation, the patience to really get to know who you're with and what's happening, and not feel, it's not pressure, but not feel the habit of just like, cool, we made a choice, now on to the next thing. And so, I guess all that to say, the instability of context turned into an opportunity for me to really reflect on what I could trust would never change, and then make choices from that position.
That's so interesting to hear about. Decision making has been kind of heavy in my life this year because we had a big fork in the road kind of decision. And the feedback we kept getting, me and my husband, was you can't make a wrong choice. They're both great. But that almost was harder because I'm like, can I just have a bad choice and a good choice so that I can pick the good one and feel good? Because when you have two good choices, you end up feeling longing and regret for whichever one you didn't choose. And then what stuck out to me too as I was going through this is it's not these big fork in the road decisions that really define our lives. It's like the everyday, like what's our North Star? And if you live, and we realized that we were kind of out of touch with our North Star because if a big decision like that was so heavy on us, it's like we need to do more work day to day to live by that truth, that value that you're talking about, so that when those things present themselves, there's less panic.
Right.
I'll just call it what it was. We did not know what to do. And I think the small choices every day, like you say, going to the river and walking, like that's the kind of stuff that makes your life day to day, no matter where you end up or, how you live in the moment and who you're with.
Yeah.
It makes up a life. And so I think that's really beautiful. You've had that chance to slow down and.
Oh man. Yeah. I would not want that to not happen. Like, cause there are many people, that I encounter who have a desire to slow down. Like they want that feeling of rest. And they don't see the opportunity in their current structure of life to be able to say, okay, I'm just going to stop. I'm going to start from almost a blank slate and be like, all right, how do I reorganize all the pieces? Because the pieces themselves might not be bad, but the way they've been kind of organized together is just intense, possibly, or starts to run the life and not the person.
Yeah.
Right. And so you get panic because all the things are coming at you. You get stressors because you don't have a feedback loop. You don't know what's actually happening. For me, a lot of what led me to burnout was feeling like I might be blindsided. Like there's so much that's happening. I can see a lot, and normally my vision is fairly broad, but I don't know what I don't know. And there was a lot of responsibility. So I'm like, well, maybe something's going to happen that I'm not ready for and that I can't fulfill the responsibility of. And so that
Yeah.
is kind of a load of pressure. Um, that's, yeah, oh man, it's crushing sometimes.
I would love to talk about your project you have coming up in August,
Mm-hmm.
The Dark Night of the Soul. Am I
Yeah.
getting the title correct?
We cut it short. We just say Dark Night,
Dark Night. Okay.
but it's based on the idea of the Dark Night of the Soul.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you share about that?
Sure. So a little backstory. In 2015, Syria started to devolve the country into a civil war. And I'm in the States, I'm with my folks, but I'm seeing on the news and I'm reading in the papers online visions and stories of what my folks had told me their experience in Lebanon was like. And so we're now a generation later, history is echoing, and I feel like I'm not in a position to do anything about it. I don't have a very big platform. I can't really like raise money. I'm a very, show up and do something kind of person. I didn't think I could hop on a plane and go to Syria and make any difference. And the thought comes to my mind, yeah, but you can dance for a really long time. And I didn't know what to make of that. Other than, all right, that's normally how projects start. They start with the seed of an idea. And so I started scratching on it. What does it mean to dance for a really long time? What can that do for the situation that's happening that I see? And I started to flush out an endurance project. And there's a whole world of endurance performance art where artists will do certain things, whether it's dancing or playing music or sitting across the table from someone or for hours and hours and hours on end. And I also think about, things that people have had to endure for the sake of something to change. If the world around you is changing and you don't think it's changing for a good reason, how do you endure holding where you are for the sake of the world around you to have that reference point in the midst of massive change? If you think that the world isn't changing and you feel drawn to change, how do you endure the journey of transformation in yourself for the sake of bearing witness to that possibility to the world around you? And it all feels to some degree like you're separate from everything else while that's happening. So how do you endure that feeling of isolation? So especially in terms of resisting a possible thing or initiating a possible thing, there's this idea of endurance that comes up. And so nothing ever happened of the project. This is now 10 years ago when the seed was planted, but it's been in the back of my head.
And just for context for folks, Lebanon and Syria are neighbors. And I was reading this morning that Lebanon per capita has the highest number of refugees because it's only about 5.5 million population. And I think they hosted about 1.5 million Syrian refugees.
At least in the height of it, it was 1 in 5. 1 in 5 Syrian refugees were in Lebanon. So, no, let's get it right.
1 in 5 of the residents of Lebanon were
Syrian refugee.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
So we're now 10 years later. The world is completely different. I've gone through a personal journey where every relationship in my life has transformed. They literally shifted post burnout. Burnout was kind of the catalyst for it, but they all changed. My relationship with my family, with my work, with friendships, everything. It's like, oh, this is now qualitatively different. But I had to endure about 3 years of restructuring. And I start teaching at Trika, which is an arts preschool in the North End. And they have a wonderful venue that opened up post-pandemic, a former Methodist church that they renovated and effectively rebuilt internally. Um, and they have a beautiful wood floor. And I'm teaching tap dance to 3 to 5 year olds.
Wow.
And they're phenomenal. The kids are amazing. And before and after the classes, I fiddle on the wood because that's what tap dancers do. And most places don't let you dance on their floor. So if you have the opportunity, take it. And I realize that this is happening and I'm allowed to dance on this floor and the venue's amazing. And so I have this proposal from years ago about this endurance project. And I go to John, who's the artistic director of Trika, and I say, hey, I have this project. I'd like to share it with you. And I send him the proposal, and he comes back and he says, this is an amazing project. We'd like to support it. And that was the catalyst. So I have a venue. I've been talking about this thing for 10 years. So there are people who are around it that are effectively like a loose creative team. Mm-hmm. So I give them all a call. I say, listen, I think this is really happening. We have a team. We have a gig. We might have a date. And the ball starts rolling. And now the project isn't tied to a particular event. Syrian civil war, the pandemic. It is tied to this idea of the dark night of the soul. And the dark night of the soul was a term coined by St. John of the Cross, this Catholic monk from the 1500s, who wrote a poem about the dark night of the soul, which he described as this moment of utter blindness in which a person is acted upon to be formed in a particular way. So there's lots of things that we think that we can do to become particular kinds of people. And for St. John, the Dark Night was a particular kind of event on this journey of formation that you don't do anything, but something happens with you. And for him, his vision of life has a living God. It has Jesus Christ as like realities. And so he starts to talk about this idea where everything that we use to orient ourselves to the world gets stripped away, and we're left with having to come to terms with the reality of God for him. And not being able to be active in that. Just kind of, okay, I guess this is reality now.
To surrender almost.
Yeah. To let go, to retain a sense of what is real or who we are, or you can still make a choice in the dark night, but you're not really active in the thing that's happening. There's a stripping away of kind of enjoyment in things because that can be a distraction to the reality that you're loved, period, end of sentence. And there's nothing that you do that earns that love. But in the dark night of the soul, there is a very specific choice to be had, and that is the choice to endure it. Do we, after kind of the catalytic event of these things that were we're oriented to being stripped away, and that often happens by surprise and without preparation. Do we say, okay, I I think this is now the thing I'm going through. This feels like this feels really hard, but it doesn't feel bad, quote unquote. Um, I have a sense of being cared for in the midst of all this stripping away. Do we say, cool, I'm just going to sit here and let God do his thing with me? Or do we turn and run back to yeah, but I really enjoyed being able to, be the lead on a project at my work.
Mm.
Or I really enjoyed the times where I just got to sit by the river and, take in the sun and just feel rested. Not that resting is the problem, but the joy that we derive from it is the thing that gets stripped for the sake of having some even deeper knowledge of the love that's available for each one of us. And so that choice to endure or not has become the crux of this event. I'll be tap dancing for 12 hours from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So literally through the dark night.
Oh, wow.
It's in August, so it likely won't be dark very early, but we're going to get there. Trika it's a very open space, so we're going to build a kind of labyrinth in the space for people to be able to walk through, slow down, interact with a few prompts, have an opportunity for contemplation around experiences of darkness, experiences of hope in the middle of darkness. One question is often, in the dark night of the soul, do you get to dream? Do you get to still have an idea of what comes after?
Mm.
And sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes there's a hope that's more rooted than a dream that comes to pass, that gets seeded, where you can say, even with everything stripped away, I know that there's a reality in which love, peace, mercy, gentleness, kindness exists. And that's whatever I can do to point myself to that. That's what I'm aiming for. That can happen in the middle of a dark night, right? And that almost reorients ourselves in the midst of all the other stuff that happens. So it becomes kind of like a very deep contemplation. It's like somewhere different than in our thoughts. And so building a piece, a performance piece, an event, an invitation for that kind of contemplation is basically what we're hoping to do.
Wow. That's an amazing goal, the 12 hours. I mean, what is the longest you've ever tap danced before?
I've done 3.
3.
Yeah. And I wasn't sore the day after. So that to me is like a marker of possibility.
I'm just so moved and inspired by everything you've just said about going through the dark night and choosing to contemplate instead of distract or avoid, which are my 2 favorite go-tos. And so you're really speaking right to me right now with this, how do you let this shape you more into who you want to be instead of the resistance, instead of how can I avoid thinking about what's happening, like going deeper. And for you, dancing longer. And I asked you before this, like, are you doing a lot of extra squats lately? Are you doing calf lifts? And you said no, because the dark night usually is not something you can prepare for. It's usually a surprise. So.
Yeah. There are plenty of models of trained endurance in the world. and they are wonderful. You've got marathon runners, you have ultra marathon runners, you have strong man events, you have lots of things where people who have trained to last achieve their goal, right? But the dark night of the soul is not something that you necessarily specifically prepare for. You might, right? Like for folks who are being drawn and are conscious kind of their spiritual development, their spiritual formation, the dark night of the soul happens, and they might be the type who get to it and say, "Oh, cool, this is going to be hard, and here we go." Right? But I actually think the dark night of the soul comes upon everyone, whether we're conscious of kind of who we're becoming or not. And for me, it's really important that when that happens, there's a vision for the choice to endure, the choice to like attempt to have our eyes open, to have our ears open, to be able to see not necessarily just the reality of the loss that often catalyzes these things, whether it's the loss of a dream or the loss of a job or the loss of a relationship or the loss of, like, especially if somebody moves, the loss of the future that you would have had you stayed in a world where lots of things happen to us because of larger movements, the feeling of loss of control. What can I do for the sake of my own life in a world that acts upon me? And often those things strip away the things that I want. Those are really, really hard situations. And to know in like a really, really base level, like at our core, that the people that we're becoming are the greatest gift that we give to the world, shifts everything else. And if St. John of the Cross is right, and experiencing darkness is part of that formation and a necessary and a natural part of it, not something that comes upon us because we did something wrong or that is some kind of cosmic punishment, but rather is the thing that we need to be able to go through to be able to see differently and to be able to trust differently. Again, shifts how we might be able to walk through some of the things that naturally happen in the world.
This is speaking really deeply to me right now, especially in my work at a time where I feel like we don't have control to help people the way we used to and to bring families back together the way we used to. Oh, it's been so heavy and so sad. And I think it's like easy to get lost and caught up in all like the latest headlines and what now, and just getting off work and like trying to go out and be distracted and not think about it anymore. Yeah. And I'm not even the one in these situations of the families. That's who I'm grieving for, is like, I want them to be safe. I want them to be reunited. I want them to feel secure and belonging here. And some of it, it's hard to feel so much so quickly out of and it's always out of your control. There's sometimes like semblances that you can think. I mean, things are always out of our control, but in life.
Yeah, well, there's this interesting thing where it's like you start talking about darkness, and then the easy out is to say, well, there's a purpose in it, right? Mm-hmm. And yes, that is likely true, and also not all of the catalytic events are necessarily good,
Yeah.
right? It's like seeing families separated can't be good, because we know the pain of severed relationships. Uh, just that is kind of enough to pile on grief and sadness if you're within the context of just bearing witness to that happening. And so for me, there isn't like I'm not trying to find an out, even in like spiritual talk.
No, I don't get that from you. I'm well familiar with like the platitudes
Yeah,
that come with
sure.
everything happens for a reason, or God
Yep.
won't give you more than you can handle. And I don't sense that that's
Yeah.
where you're coming from at all. I really see
But
it as,
I think it's important to like state, right?
yeah.
Because it like I can feel the heaviness from you, and I think that's reality. That's part of the care that it's part of the relationship that comes when you care for others. And when you see them hurting, then that relationship is literally inside us. So if they hurt, we feel that hurt. And it does something to the way we make choices and to the way that we decide to be in the world. And I think that's all really, really important. And clarity in those times, especially when the emotions are heavy or high, or there's a lot happening and it's all dramatic and it's all like, how in the world can this be happening? Because we know we wouldn't want this to be the thing. I think clarity and kind of self-composition can come from enduring that for a time, right? While holding to love can still exist. I can't do everything, but I can do what I can. Um, and who knows? We were talking earlier, and you mentioned this idea that the small regular choices that we make on a day-to-day basis are often more effective than the big ones, right? Because they create the patterns that, well, on the feedback loop, they'll show us who we are, right? And eventually help us turn, even if it's 1% in one direction or another, 1 degree, turn our patterns into a different way. And I think the idea to just stay in the context where pain is happening and bear witness to it and be present for others is super powerful. Not even if, and this might be a cop-out, but it's to say, even if you can't see the change happening, right? Being with someone can be transformative, right? It's almost like, if you have a cut, the white blood cells in the body rush to the cut, right? There's a mechanism in the body that's like, we have an open wound here, go. And I often wonder, like, how many of those white blood cells are actually doing the work of healing the wound, and how many are just there, right? Saying, okay, nothing from the outside is going to get in. We're going to protect the rest of the body, while these other folks are like actually like doing the blood clotting and getting the scab to form. And what if the communities that we were a part of functioned like that, where if there is an open wound, like, boom, there's a rush of people. And some of the people are just like, we're just here. We don't have any particular role. because we don't have any particular skill for this activity, but we're present and we can bear witness. We can be called upon when necessary, and it's easier to be called upon if you're proximate, if you're there. Um, and so that part of, I think part of enduring for me, especially being the son of immigrants, an only child, kind of inside this super subculture of tap dance, is finding, like, enduring in relationships enough to find a communal dynamic that's like that, where, you know, inside and outsiders are not necessarily the metric. It's how can we be there for one another.
You were sharing with me the other day about the kind of cultural dynamics of your life and your work and how diverse it is, and I thought that was really cool. Not only having your roots in Lebanon through your parents, but then everyone you've gotten to. Can you share a little bit about more like culturally, like the interactions and how that has shaped you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think so. Son of immigrants, and both my parents are from Lebanon, so that means our house had a particular culture, right? So once you cross the threshold of the door, there's a particular dynamic. But I go to public school, and I went to a magnet school first, so that has a particular dynamic, and that's where I first encounter kind of American culture, whatever that really means. And then I'm in dance school, which is a different culture than public school and a different culture than my home. And I start that at, you know, I'm in dance school first, actually. So that's 3.5 years old. And then public school at 5. And then by the time I'm 10, I'm in this kind of tap dance community, this subculture, which, again, different ideas than dance school, different ideas than public school, and different ideas than my home. And I don't know, I mean, you can talk about code switching and this idea of like different needing to show up different ways in different areas, but I don't think that gets to kind of the heart of my experience, at least, which was, sure, you show up differently because there's different activities happening, and there are different kind of ideals. If you want to be a good tap dancer, there's a model. If you want to be a good student at school, here's a model. If you want to be a good dancer at dance school, there's a model. If you want to be a good son to your parents, there's the model. And for me, in every place, I was very attentive to what the model was, and I wanted to be that model. Again, that achievement orientation thing. But I think so. There is a particular amount of switching that you might feel because the models are different, and there is a thing when you come into America from particularly a country like Lebanon, where the culture is so dramatically different. One way to feel like you can communicate with others is by your merit. Are you good? If you're good at what you do, then okay, we can have a conversation because there's nothing else that really is compatible. The language functions differently. Even if you speak English, like in Lebanon, you learn English, French, and Arabic all at the same time. And so my parents were fluent in English, but they, you know, folks from Lebanon will do this thing where if we're talking about this book, you talk about everything around the book and never the actual book, right? But you're still talking English.
Yeah.
But you're not using the language in the same way.
Isn't it like the explicit versus the inferred cultures or
how do you ask for something that you would like to have happen? Well, you ask if the other person would like to do that. And they know that you're asking because you would actually like to do that. But you're not going to do it alone. You're going to be hospitable to them. So they will say yes because they're going to be hospitable to your request. And then you end up doing the thing. But you never go to someone and say, hey, can you do this for me? Because that would be imposing. And you never impose upon somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? So that, so I'm coming up with that kind of language, the language in tap dance land, the language in the dance school, the language in public school, and the one thing that's common around all of it is, oh, you did a good job. Right? That was good. Whatever that was, your homework assignment, solo, your performance at competition, and my folks, God bless them, because they weren't achievement oriented with me. They celebrated the fact that I put in good effort.
Yeah.
So I would get the celebration before I got the grade. And even immersed in that at home, I couldn't get out of the achievement oriented context everywhere else. And that being kind of the guiding principle until burnout. Right? And that's when this idea of finding somebody else's mark, like intuiting it, hitting it, and then very quickly, and then moving on to the next mark became untenable.
Yeah.
It's unsustainable, can't do it. Okay, so if that's not the way, what's the way? What is the frame or the reality that I'm going to entrust my life to? Because choices I make affect my life, that will reconcile all these things. I still want to be able to move in whatever community I find myself in and not feel like, oh, they do this and so I'm not a part of that, or they do this and I'm not a part of it. I don't know, I don't understand how to speak their language. It's like, no, I can learn whatever language needs to be learned for the sake of having a conversation. You end up being stripped from the frames and finding some way of relating that's more person to person, I think, than like abstraction to abstraction. Because eventually, like the tap dance community is an abstraction. Like public school is an abstraction. But Gregory Hines was a person who I knew, who we could sit down and have a conversation with. Chris Collins is a person that I know. We can sit down and have a conversation together. And in that way, all the frames kind of, they're there and you can see them, but they don't hold weight as much anymore.
Yeah.
But it is a harrowing experience to have, family frames, work frames, even abstract ideas of like identity. They all just go away.
It
and
is
you're
harrowing.
like, who am I? Like, where am I? What time am I in? And I think for me, the only thing that reconciles all that is to be in a loving relationship in the most existential way. And then it's like, oh, okay, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Like the relational aspect of me, or the relational context that I'm in, is telling me that I'm okay. I'm not done. I'm not perfect, but I'm okay. And that, if that gets rooted, then again, I'm really fast and excitable. So it's like, oh, I'm okay. Cool, let's go. Like, what's the next thing? We can do whatever the next thing is. It's like, no. You need to really know.
Yeah, really sit in that.
That you're okay, and not jump back to, oh, I can do the thing and I can be
Accomplishing.
really good at the thing that we're going to do next. And I know we're okay. Like, that's cool. I'm glad you told me that. Right? But like really, really, really sit with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely going to be sitting with this conversation. It's gone so fast. We're out of time.
Oh man. Okay.
It was such a pleasure talking with you, and I'm definitely going to be mulling over what you said. And it sounds like your August project is interactive, and so
Yeah.
I'll
100%.
post in the show notes how people, if they're in the Boise area, can engage. And we'll be wishing you well as you get ready for this amazing
Thank
project.
you very much.
Dark Night, 12-hour tap dance. I'm so happy to know you and get to learn about this, and thank you for sharing with Mosaic. Thank you for joining the conversation. For more information on how to be involved with refugee resettlement, please visit idahorefugees.org. Mosaics is produced by the Idaho Office for Refugees with grant support from the M.J. Murdoch Charitable Trust. Music by the Afrosonics. Production in partnership with SB Studios.